Good afternoon, friends. David Wright here, and I am your host of the Disruptive Innovators Champions of Digital Business podcast. And this afternoon, I am lucky enough to be joined by Leo Bodden. Leo, it's a pleasure to have you on.
David, thank you so much for having me on. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, me too, man. For those of our listeners who don't know, Leo, can you tell everyone a little bit about your current role?
Sure, absolutely. My name is Leo Bodden, as you mentioned. I am the Group Vice President and Chief Digital and Technology Officer for NewYork-Presbyterian. For those that don't know, NewYork-Presbyterian is the university hospital for Columbia Medical School and Weill Cornell Medicine. So we have two Ivy League organizations that we partner with to provide services for our patients.
Yes, I'm a huge fan. So Leo, I want to get into your personal backstory and a little bit about your current role, obviously, as well. But we like to start out with one piece of actionable advice you'll look to leave with our listeners today.
Sure. And this was one that really big for me when my old boss now was my new boss as of 7 years ago. Um, as a technologist, pretty much my entire career since 1995, I always thought tech was about tech, especially in healthcare. And what I've come to learn over the last 7 years, but should have known well before then, is that healthcare technology is more about the people than the technology. It really is, the technology itself is the easy part. It's the people that you need to spend most of your time focused on. And so people and change management is most of what I do now, most of what I focus on now.
Yeah, that resonates with me 100%. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that. But before that, Leo, I want to share with our listeners where did you start out and how did you get to being the chief, technology and digital officer of a huge health system in New York?
Sure, I love sharing this story because I never intended to go into technology. Uh, I certainly never intended to go into healthcare. All I ever wanted to do was be a fighter pilot. So I actually went into the Air Force Academy. I was in the Air Force for almost 2 years, and then I left and had to figure out what I was going to do with my life. I had a number of majors. I did pre-med. I did engineering, and at the time, this was back in 1995. One of my professors said, "Hey, you seem to be pretty good with technology. Why don't you change your major to computer science?" And so I did. Changed my major to computer science. As I'm getting closer to graduation, I realized I had no experience. And so I walked into Columbia Presbyterian Medical Center at the time and asked for an internship. I received an interview. They liked me. I loved them. And I worked as a volunteer for about 9 months, the first 9 months of my career. I was very, very fortunate to have gone into healthcare, actually into IT, back in 1995 because it was just exploding. And then, of
Right.
course, having the opportunity to work at Columbia Presbyterian Medical Center, where you have some of the brightest minds, had some of the brightest minds in technology at the time, I could not be more fortunate. So some of my mentors were the people that connected the 14th node on the internet. And these were the people that were educating me on technology and what you should think about, what you should do. And so I feel very, very fortunate to have come in when I did. And every time that I thought of a new opportunity or thought that things should go a different direction, the organization has backed me up. And so 15 jobs later, I'm the Chief Digital and Technology Officer for NewYork-Presbyterian.
Wow. So your tenure has been spent with New York Presbyterian that whole time.
almost 28 years this summer. Correct.
Wow. Well, that's I mean, I think that's also a testament to the culture there. I would argue as well. I mean, I think you know this, but my my mother-in-law has been a nurse there for almost 25 years. Uh,
Yeah,
and it's not a uncommon story, from what I
it is
understand.
not an uncommon story, and certainly when I came in, it was even more common. I am very impressed with how focused NYP is on its people, on developing its people, investing in its people, and ultimately having, someone like me have the opportunity to be where I am today.
So Leo, along your journey, what's one of the most important things that you've learned in life, uh, personally or professionally, and what was life like before learning it and after learning it?
Yeah, that's a heavy one, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about that because I think is what's allowed me to grow in my career. I would say it begins with perspective, recognizing the differences in perspective. When I talk to my team, I always use this meme. You can find it on the internet. You just do a Google search on perspective, and you write 9 and 6 or 6 and 9, and essentially it's two cartoon characters looking at a 6 or a 9, uh, facing them, and one is arguing that it's a 6, the other one is arguing that it's a 9, and as an outsider looking at it from 10,000 feet, you recognize very quickly where the disconnect is. And early on in my career, I didn't spend a lot of time pausing to try to understand that. One of the best opportunities that I ever got as a technologist was to take on the biomedical engineering team. And the reason was technology was changing in biomedical engineering, and the teams did not understand general technology. They are the best, some of the best technologists that I ever met, but they're more analog than digital. They know how an MRI works. They know, they are physicists in their own right. They know how an X-ray machine works, how a CT scanner works, how an infusion pump, a physiologic monitor. They're very, very bright people, but when it comes to general IT, they just didn't recognize it. And so my organization again gave me another amazing opportunity, and I actually said, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to fix it overnight. And I have to say I was humbled by what I learned almost moments after coming in, just how bright these folks were. And I also had the opportunity to witness disagreements between these very bright people who, on one side you have analog and they have one perspective, on the other side you have digital, and there's another perspective. I was fortunate that I grew up during an analog age, but I transitioned quickly to digital, and I got to sit there and witness how they're saying the same exact thing but arguing with each other. And so I think if there was anything that I brought to the table, was that I was able to recognize the personal perspectives, teams' perspectives, and then translate for the other teams to ensure that we paused and trusted and respected each other in order to move the ball forward, to move as a unified group. And then along those same lines, and this was something that, how it was more simply translated by my old boss, it was the term MRI. And the term MRI stands for most respectful interpretation. We tend to cause issues for ourselves when we make assumptions of what someone was intended, what message someone was intending to convey, and waste too much time unnecessarily. And so taking that, I think, for me, has been a career changing experience.
Wow. Yeah, that perspective, I mean, it's just so huge. And in working with and you mentioned people as we started out, and a huge piece of what we do from an OCM standpoint is really listening to people across an organization who are saying things slightly differently, but so often have a very, very similar vision, and basically just translating it into a language that everyone can appreciate, right? Um, and the other thing that I thought of when you were talking about perspective, and it's a little different, a little more heady, but this story of the Tao farmer and how, he his horses run away, but then his horses come back and they bring more horses. Uh, then the wild horses break his son's leg, but then the army comes and they can't take him or his son into the army. All along, these townspeople are saying, "Oh, that's awful. Oh, that's great," and the guy is just like, and it just goes to show that I have no idea, right? I mean, especially with things that are completely out of my control, right? So to get worked up, I need to practice kind of that radical acceptance, and that perspective, right, is so huge. It's such a good reminder. So yeah, I just thought of that. Leo, how about one of your biggest challenges, or a failure, if you will, that sticks out in your mind as something you learned a lot from?
Um, so my biggest personal challenge had to do with the why I left the Air Force Academy. Like I mentioned before, when we started the conversation, I only wanted to do one thing, and one thing only, and that was to be a fighter pilot. I wanted to graduate from the Air Force Academy, and I wanted to serve my country as a career. At the academy, I didn't apply myself. I lost sight of my objective, and I ultimately ended up being dismissed for academic deficiency. And as a 19-year-old, that was the biggest mistake that I had ever made, and it changed my life forever. Um, I actually, I went back for a master's later in life, and I remember telling my wife that I was going to graduate number one. And the reason I wanted to graduate number one from my MBA program was to erase the ghost that was still walking with me.
Mm.
And as I'm giving the valedictory speech after graduation, I look behind me and there's that ghost still standing there. And so that ghost is there, for a couple of things. One, to remind me that I made a huge mistake. And also to remind me that that was the best and worst thing that could ever happen to that could have ever happened to me. On one side, I lost my dream, and it was horrible. It took me 3 years to recover from it. On the other side, I learned humility. I learned that hubris has no business in leadership. I think I would have probably been a great officer, but never would I have been a humble leader. Certainly not where I am today. And so having lost that was life changing for me. It was a game changer. And just last week actually, when I was sharing this story with some new leadership that joined the organization, one of my colleagues called out, "Hey, like you have to recognize that so much you've been able to do so much, and who knows what would have happened had you stayed." And he's right. But in my formative years, there was only one thing that I ever wanted to do. Still to this day, when I see fighter jets flying, my heart skips a beat. And so I'm always reminded of that big mistake that I made once upon a time.
Wow. Yeah, that's it, it's well, and it's amazing that you learned that lesson about hubris that early on at 19. I mean, it took me far longer for that to set in. I had a family event happened that, it really struck me that this striving for success, like, was completely meaningless if I didn't have my family to enjoy it with, right? It just would be completely empty. And so it's great that you had that experience. And from the way I interpret it is that those types of things that have happened in my past, like, uh I won't regret it, or shut the door on it, because you know I can personally benefit from it, and then I can use that experience, like you were just sharing that story, to hopefully benefit others along theirs. um okay, so Leo, I want to talk a little bit about your current role at New York Presbyterian. Uh, Before we jump into that, we like to ask favorite book or literary piece, either all time or that you've read recently.
Sure. And so I have two, if it's okay.
Of
Uh,
course.
and it's funny that you talked about the things that you can't control. So my favorite author is John C. Maxwell. If he writes it, I read it. And as I started growing in my career, I would always find these self-help books. And my favorite quote from John C. Maxwell was one that gave me so much freedom, because it made me realize how much time I wasted worrying about things that I have no control over. And so, if it's okay, I'll read it for you. It's so he's quoted as saying, "Why worry about things you can't control when you can keep yourself busy controlling the things that depend on you?" And so,
Mm,
so that quote is always with me. I waste no time thinking about things that are outside of my control. And so I was happy that you brought that up. Um, and then as far as my favorite book, probably for different reasons than most people read the book, is The Richest Man in Babylon. And I don't know if you know, or for those that don't know, this was actually one of the books that inspired Rich Dad Poor Dad. It was written by George S. Clason. And what the main reason I love that book more than, talks about the 7 cures for a lean purse. So really it's about money management, or the main focus,
right.
the sum is money management. But why I love that book, it's set 5,000 years ago, and in those days of course, you had slavery, and you can sell yourself into slavery. You could buy your freedom back from slavery. And in the book, they follow a character that was a very, very hard working slave, and he was able, through hard work, through really hard work, he was able to buy back his freedom. And then he is one of the richer folks at the end of the book. And so that always reminds me of the importance of work ethic, and how really, as long as you're working hard, it's very difficult for anyone to fail. And I see that time and time and time again. I mean, regardless of where you stand on the political spectrum, one of the hardest working people on the planet is Elon Musk. And you can see how successful he's been, obsessed with work. Um,
Right.
I'm not saying that everyone's going to be an Elon Musk, but certainly through hard work, you can certainly persevere.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I my wife's parents immigrated to the United States 30 years ago, didn't speak a lick of English, started working at a law office, with folks who did speak the language, learned the language. Her mom has been a nurse at New York Presbyterian, as you know, for almost 25 years now, and her dad started buying and restoring, flipping properties, and now they own, multiple properties in Williamsburg. It's just like you said, that work ethic and that drive. And I mean, you could really do anything. So
If
Um,
I could share, just since you shared about your family, we
please.
moved we moved here from the Dominican Republic. I should have probably shared this in the beginning. When I was 10 years old, I knew how to count to 10. And that was the extent of the English that I spoke way back when.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. So there you go. It's right there. I just have so much respect for those who uh, who do that. So anyway, so now you're the CTO and Chief Digital Officer at New York Presbyterian. Leo, what's your vision for IT and digital as it's derived from the overall mission of the organization?
Sure. And I actually, as I was thinking about that, I had to steal the vision from a newly hired COO who put everything into perspective for us a couple of weeks ago as we were just getting to know each other. And as he described it, I just felt it was perfect for all of us and for us to use that vision. And essentially what that vision is at NYP is to be the best place to receive and give care in the world, period. And so everything that we do is with that in mind. But I can't say those were my words. Dr. Paresh Shah, who recently joined us as our COO for our Cornell sphere, was the person that came up with that phraseology.
Love it. So that being the case, what are some of the key initiatives that you're focused on that kind of roll up to that overarching vision?
Sure. So key initiatives. We want to set ourselves up. We want to create frictionless care. And so over the past couple of years, we've been focusing on digitizing our front door, simplifying access for our patients. It was interesting, and I know that you didn't have an opportunity to mention it once we started recording, but it was interesting that you said how easy it is for you to get services from our organization through digital media. The
Right.
reality is that I can't say that it is easy for most. It is actually very difficult for most. At our organization, a couple of years ago, you needed to know someone in order to get access to services. And so what we're doing is working on an omni-channel strategy to simplify access for our patients through whatever medium they want to come. We also want to make sure that regardless of which way they come in, if they need to switch channels, they're able to switch from one channel to another as seamlessly as humanly possible. So that is a key initiative for us as an organization, and one that we're spending a lot of time and resources working through.
Yeah, huge lift for an organization of your size. Something that uh, is not uncommon to say the least in the healthcare industry right now. I actually probably have had 20 conversations in the last like 2 months about, organizations that are sifting through stuff like that. Um, what are some of the biggest challenges that you'd say you guys are facing right now as an organization, Leo?
Sure, and it goes back to the very beginning, change management. What we're trying to do right now requires a tremendous amount of change, and we're doing it off the heels of the pandemic. And so we've had a brain drain. We've lost a lot of very good people that had been with us for many years, that understood the politics, the processes, where the skeletons are buried. So we lost a
Right.
lot of people, and we're trying to rebuild the same structure with folks that don't have the historical information. So with all of that happening, we're then asking them to change how they do business. And so this is really more than a technology initiative. As I mentioned before, the tech is the easy part. It's a
Right.
change. You know, we have the capabilities, the tools are there, but we have to make sure that our people are educated, know how to use them, and want to use them. And so that's going to be probably, I'd say, over the next 12 to 36 months is going to be our biggest focus.
Yeah, and I forgot. I mean, we didn't even. I mean, you mentioned this when we first started out, but the complexities of having an academic element to your business as well are state by state. I mean, it's just vast. I mean, it's that adds a whole nother layer of complexity, I'm sure.
The growth
So
also, so the growth also adds a layer of complexity. We grew quite fast. We, in some cases, don't realize just how big we are. I like to tell people that we're like a lion, a baby lion that's beginning to realize that it's a lion, and it goes out on its first hunt. And it's not until that lion pounces on a wildebeest that it realizes, "Ooh, I'm a lion." But that is our reality right now. We're still learning who we are, and again, I'm very hopeful that we'll get there quickly, and by quickly again, 12, 36 months. But it's going to be work from beginning to end.
100%. It's great that you guys have are well on your way on the journey. I know that you are. Um, what about some and you touched on some of the mentoring that you clearly give your team a little bit earlier, but what about some of the best practices that you and your team follow?
Yeah. Uh, so philosophically, I'm an infrastructure person. And with any infrastructure person, everything begins with a rock solid foundation. And so when my teams and I start talking through what we're going to do, whether it's people, process, or technology, is really defining what that best, what the um, the most solid foundation is going to be before
Mm,
we get things going.
I love that. Yeah, I identify with that because with anything that we do as well, we look to try to identify that existing framework at the base that works, right? And how do we build off of that and not reinvent the wheel where we don't have to? Um,
There's there's the idea or the need to eliminate waste or excess, right? The when you're building these types of foundations, you want to make sure that you don't have any extras, because those extras will fail. If you have a tertiary process, that process will fail. If you have a tertiary or additional pieces of equipment, everything fails. And so we need to expect that whatever we put in will fail at one point or another. And so the less we do in that sense of the word, the better positioned we are if there are adjustments that need to be made.
you know, it's so cool, Leo, to see someone like yourself who came from that kind of technical, infrastructural background who is really totally made that jump into this executive leadership role where it is people, process, methodology, but being able to take those principles and apply them in this way, I mean, is such a like dual threat. It's really neat to hear about. Um,
I
so
appreciate
it's
that.
just
I do feel very fortunate that I was able to start the way I did and that the organization trusted me to make the transition.
how about some of the most innovative things that either you guys are working on right now? I mean, the initiative that we just mentioned is huge, but that you're either working on right now or that are on the horizon for New York Presbyterian.
Sure. So first I'll start saying, and not knowing some of the folks who will be listening, uh, we are fortunate that over the past 5, 7 years, we've been uber focused on standardization. We
Mm,
actually kicked off a relentless standardization initiative 7 years ago. And so now we're at a point where we're standardized on our EMRs, we're standardized on the technologies leveraged by all our ologies, radiology, neuro, cardiology, et cetera. And so with all that standardization, it actually has opened the door for us to leverage other things. And so one that I am eager to track is how we're leveraging AI for clinical decision support. As an organization, we've kicked off an initiative to overlay AI on our OB monitoring to allow or to provide support for our caregivers who are monitoring our most at-risk patients. And
Wow.
so we just went live with one hospital last week. We expect to be fully live across all our hospitals by the summer. And then it's going to be measuring our level of success. But the idea there with this AI platform is to really allow the clinicians to provide the care at the bedside and not be obsessively concerned about what is that noise, what does that noise mean in the background, which is something that you hear whenever you walk into an OB unit, an ICU, any one of our central stations or nurses stations. And so that's a focus for us this year. Then we talked a little bit about the digitization of our front door. And so leveraging, our tools, and I just very quickly, without going into a lot of detail, so leveraging, Epic, Salesforce, an AI platform that we have for patient communication called Syllable, Cisco, and a number of other technologies to simplify access for our patients, with the objective, again, to eliminate friction for our patients trying to access our services. So those are two examples of what I feel are fairly innovative initiatives. There are a lot of industries that are doing far more, but in healthcare, I would argue that those are fairly innovative initiatives that I think are going to be game changers in the next couple of years.
Agreed, 100%. And quickly, I mean, we delivered both of our daughters at Alexander Cohen. Shout out to Alexander Cohen. Just such an amazing. When you mentioned OB, I thought of them, and just a tremendous facility. The nurses, the doctors were just all fantastic. So, and when you talked about the AI assisted, kind of freeing the caregiver up to focus on that compassionate experience, that also translates to, I thought, of patient access, right? So it's, so often these individuals in our patient access centers are, they're trying to verify who's on the line, then they're trying to look up their records, then they're trying to, work on through multiple tools, and it doesn't allow them really to be present there with the patient, right? Because they're just doing their job, right? But how can we leverage technology integrations like you guys are doing to automate so much of that, so that when the patient calls in, all of that information is already populated, the patient's already verified, and they can just concentrate on delivering a compassionate experience, right?
And to that point, David, is also thinking through the entire patient journey to ensure that you're simplifying every step of the way.
100%. Very cool, Leo. So last couple questions. Where do you see the healthcare industry going in the future? Obviously, a lot of changes right now. What do you think will be some of the biggest changes as time passes?
Yeah, it's interesting. I am a pessimist from the provider perspective. I think
Mm,
healthcare is going to improve drastically. I think we're in the middle of major disruption going on in healthcare right now. I mentioned, for me, best time to go into the IT field, the IT industry was back in 1995 when I came in. I truly believe that the best time to be in healthcare IT is right now. And the reason is all the disruption that's going on. Now, with all that disruption comes entrance. There is creative destruction that could potentially change the landscape for healthcare organizations.
right.
How we make money, essentially finance our services, is changing, and we have to change with that. What does that mean? I think payers are getting more access to information. The regulations are changing, right? We're being more transparent, which we have to because we're doing this for our patients. But with all that
Right.
transparency, the payers will have access to information that then they can leverage to adjust, nudge where patients could potentially go. This is a lower cost, high quality or similar quality provider. Shift services to that provider or the other provider. It's a finite number of patients that you're servicing, and so really it's going to be the lower cost, highest quality providers that have an edge. And so
Right.
that's one piece. The other one, and this one is why I stay in healthcare working for a provider, because I would like for that solution to come from us versus like an Amazon or a Google. The
Right.
reality is it's a matter of time for organizations that have limitless funding to invest in research. It's just a matter of time before they find that um, right solution set that ultimately disrupts us. And so I'll share with you one last piece. When Amazon acquired One Medical, my heart stopped for a second, because while that's good for Amazon, could in theory be good for patient care in the long term, it's not good for us. Going head to head with Amazon, us being a $10 billion organization, them being a $1 trillion organization, I don't know that that David wins out. No pun intended.
No, but you're absolutely right, man. And this is it's funny, I have a slide in our most recent deck for in Servio about there will be winners and losers. And right now, One Medical is winning. Summa Health. That they're poised. Now, it's like you said, they haven't figured it out yet, but it's only a matter of time. And it's kind of a race for health systems that haven't built out that they weren't built in the cloud, right? They weren't built on integrated platforms. They don't have a single source of truth. Now it's thank God you guys went through that standardization effort 7 years ago, because there's still folks that are trying to figure that out. And that's really tricky when you're trying to figure that out and figure the rest of it out at the same time. Um, so yeah, like you said, disruptive time in healthcare in general for sure. Um, and now that said, it also, because we've seen a lot of, in addition to like companies like Amazon and Walgreens, which you hope have the right intentions for healthcare, also a lot of private equity money flying around, particularly in behavioral health. And, that's tricky, right? I mean, I don't know about the quality of care but that's one of the reasons I'm excited to see that kind of transition to value-based care and how that impacts the folks that are doing it right, so to speak. And I believe NewYork-Presbyterian is one of those organizations. Um so Leo, last question for you. If you could go back 5 or 10 years in time, what advice would you give your younger self?
I would probably, and this is something that I learned later in life, um, give people an out always.
Mm.
As I mentioned before, I was a technologist. I was an engineer slash architect. I wasn't very good at not winning arguments. I would come into conversations so prepared, and not allow people any wiggle room.
Mm.
Um, and I took pride in it. And I think it got in the way for many, many years. It got in the way of my own self development, my growth, because people would get nervous and shut down, and skeletons don't come to light. And so it was actually a mentor of mine many moons ago, probably 15 years, 10, 15 years ago, who gave me that bit of advice. Leo, you don't have to win every argument. You need to learn to give people an out. And I understood, by what she was saying, the why she was saying it. And what's interesting about that, as well as my career had gone up until that moment, it was like a slingshot after that,
Wow.
because I don't have to win the argument. I already know what your position is. We don't have to, I don't even have to say we'll agree to disagree. We can just disagree. And it absolutely changed the trajectory of my career.
I love that. Like I don't even need to argue, period, basically. Yeah,
I know
it
your
doesn't.
position, and that's all that matters, and we're good to go. And it makes
Love it.
for amazing relationships, by the way.
Yeah, for sure. I could see that. So cool. Leo, thank you so much for being on. It was an absolute pleasure.
Same here. It's been an honor. Thank you so much for your time.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in, and we will catch you all next week.